shoot.
All right, well, we can go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. So Elaine and I are here with the Bumble Bee Atlas to talk about some of your observations from this season. So this is what we're considering a live-ish Bumble Bee ID. So I'm Elise Bernstein. I'm the Minnesota Bumble Bee Atlas coordinator. Elaine, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep, Elaine Evans, at the extension educator with the University of Minnesota and managing the Minnesota Bumble Bee Atlas.
So our goals for today are to kind of walk through the process and the steps that we take to identify and verify bumblebees from your photos that have been uploaded to Bumble Bee Watch from your observations and surveys throughout the season. And we're hoping to share some tips and tricks to improve your photo quality in the future that we can use for identifying bumblebees. So this is not a Bumblebee ID course. We're kind of more just focusing on the processes that we use, but there are plenty of resources posted on the Minnesota Bumblebee Atlas website if you are curious as to how to identify bumblebees. And we are not trying to shame anybody for their photo skills today. This is meant to be a constructive and positive space where we'll talk about what photos did well and what they could have done better, since everybody is still learning in this process. We've done our best to crop the photos to cut out people's names, but if we accidentally do show somebody's name, we just want to apologize for that in advance. But we want this to be a positive space so we can all learn how to take better photos in the future. So to get started, here is a photo from an observation of Bombus impatiens, or the common eastern bumblebee. So in this photo, it's kind of a front view of the bumblebee. You can see its face and some of the thorax, but where this photo is now zoomed out, there aren't necessarily too many defining characteristics. So it would be hard to identify the bumblebee from just this photo on its own. But thanks to the second photo that was uploaded with this observation from the top view, we were able to determine that this is Bombus impatiens. You can see that the thorax is mostly yellow with that centralized black spot. And then onto the thorax, or onto the abdomen, the first abdominal segment is that lemony yellow color, and the rest of the segments are black, which indicates Bombus impatiens.
And just to say, everybody should feel free to unmute and ask questions, or use the chat to ask questions as we're going along. We've got some a set of pre-selected photos to talk about, but then we have time to just look at some, go in kind of live and look at some of the stuff too. So this is another observation that has been verified as Bombus bimaculatus. Again, this first photo is tricky to see what's going on, but then the second photo really helps, that the wings were lifted up and we can see what's going on in those first two abdominal segments. Those end up being really important for a lot of species to be able to tell them apart. It does really help. It can be tricky when they do hold their wings down to get those photos, but you know, in general, having a few photos, trying to catch those ones where they have their wings lifted up can be really helpful. So here's another one where, first off, it can be kind of hard to see what's going on. These are nice, clear photos, but it really helps to see from the side. You know, these first photos do really help with the male, female, telling them apart, being able to see the face and the antennae really clearly. But this photo, we can also see this leg to tell it it's a male, and we can really see, even though the wings are, over those segments, this view from the side is enough that we can see that this is a two-spotted bumblebee with those two spots in the second abdominal segment there. So those those other photos we were just showing were zoomed in really close and really clear. This photo is farther out, but even just from this one photo, we can already tell this is a two-spotted bumblebee. We're able to see what we need to see in terms of what's on the abdomen. But they do have other photos, and there's a nice zoomed in one as well. So just kind of emphasizing that it helps to have a few different photos. This one has been verified as brown belted bumblebee. Again, this close-up of the face. This one we can see that it's a male with the big eyes, extra yellow on the face. We also can really clearly see the hind leg, but kind of hard to see what's going on the abdomen. If I only had this photo, I'd be able to go, it's probably Griseocolus. And even this photo from the side, it's like, looks like it's Griseocolus, but this third photo is really the clincher, where it's super clear, where we can see that crescent with the brownish hairs on that second abdominal segment. So so those three species are kind of the biggest ones, the most common ones we see. Even just photos through the vials can work if we get the right angle and can really see what's going on the abdomen. Again, nice to get the shots where they have their wings up and we can see what's going on the abdomen. I did want to emphasize a few of the groups, as I was going to talk about two groups that tend to be more difficult for us to separate from photos. And sometimes these two species, the half-black and Sanderson's bumblebee, end up needing to be kind of glommed together because we can't tell them apart. But for the females, when there are photos, so these photos I'm showing here were taken from specimens that we had, and we had a microscope and were able to really zoom in close and get this really clear picture. But I have some examples of people being able to show this feature just with regular photos as well. So for the females, if you have bees that have the first two segments yellow and the rest of the abdomen is black, also getting a shot of the face will really help us. So what we're looking at is this malar space. It's the space between the eye and the mandible, and the part that we're measuring is from the eye to kind of the middle of where this kind of this is where the joint starts with the mandible. And basically for the half black, that space is longer than for Sanderson's. Sanderson's tends to be more kind of squarish, whereas for Vegans it's longer. It can be kind of subtle. It's not a huge difference, but getting a good photo, you can actually just go and take these measurements and compare that width to the height and separate them. So this is one that has been verified as the half-black bumblebee. And we can see we do have a view there. The antenna goes a bit over it, but in Bumble Bee Watch we can zoom in, and so even though this antenna is going over here, this isn't super clear on this zoom in, but I can see where the eye ends. I can see where the mandible starts, and I can see that this is a long space. So that helped me to be able to do that. This is a photo from the same observation, the second photo, which again, here the antenna is not in the way. We can really, and when we zoom in, we can really clearly see this feature that we need to see. Here is a bee that's been verified as Sanderson's bumblebee. So, starting from this photo, that's not very zoomed in, but able to zoom in and able to see this space here being shorter, and another photo from the same observation showing even more clearly. Like here, we can really see this space is not as long as that space was for the half-black bumblebee. So the males for the half-black and Sanderson's bumblebee, we're not able to use that mailer space, but we are able to use features that we can see on their antennae. So on their antennae, they have these different segments here, and we're comparing the length versus the width of this third segment. And again, Vagan's is longer than Sandersoni. If a harder feature to pick up with the photos is also that on Sandersoni, on the males, they have a bunch of hairs on the underside of the antennae that aren't there on the half-black. But this other feature, just looking at the length of these antennal segments, is something that works. So that sounds like it would be really hard to catch. It's not something that can be caught in every photo. It does, things do need to be in focus. So here's an example of one, an observation where we were able to pick them out. And here, zooming in, it still is hard to see, even though it's a decent photo and the antenna is pretty much in focus. It's just hard to see really what's going on there. There was a second photo, and this one we can really see the first, second, and then the third antennal segment, and we can see that third antennal segment is much longer than it is broad. There are a good number of photos for this group where they just get grouped into this 2 yellow striped group. So that's the 2 yellow stripes is about the first 2 stripes on their abdomen. And this is an observation where it does look like a female. There is this shot of the face, but it's just not quite clear enough. The lighting isn't there enough to really be able to see again, even though we have a photo from the side. So getting close enough to be in focus when they're chilled out like that, but also being aware of the light to be able to really see that feature. It's not the worst thing in the world to have these grouped together, but it does really help us to be able to talk about to make more conclusions about these organisms if we're able to separate them out by species. And this becomes even more of a concern if we do have, one of those pairs that is conservation concern, which for these 3, so I'm not talking about perplexes here, because usually they have other features that I'm able to pick them apart mostly. And where we end up having trouble with Vagan Sandersoni. Neither of those are conservation concern. So it's not the biggest deal if they're grouped together, but another difficult pair that does have a conservation concern is when we're looking at Pennsylvanicus and Oricomis. And so Pennsylvanicus is a conservation concern species. There is a petition that is being reviewed for them to be listed as an endangered species. But they are still fairly common in some parts of Minnesota, especially in the Southwest. In some places they're actually the most abundant bee. So they are around, a good chance of seeing them in many parts of the state. And there are some variabilities in the coloration, but in general, if we can get a good look at what's going on the abdomen, especially those first two segments, Pennsylvanicus will usually have yellow on T1, and Oricomis will usually have black across T1 with black going on to T2. Also, the coloration on the head, this can be hard to see depending on the angle. So both Pennsylvanicus and Oricomis have a bunch of yellow kind of on their neck, kind of right behind their head. But we're looking at just the hairs on the very top of their head. And for Pennsylvanicus, it tends to be all black hairs on the top of the head. Whereas for Oricomis, there tend to be some yellow hairs there. So for telling these apart from photos, here we can see black, we can see a little bit of yellow there. Can be a lot easier to see what's going on the abdomen, where we can see with the Pennsylvanicus, they definitely have the yellow there. The other thing, which is much more difficult to get photos at the right angle, has to do with their ocelli, the simple eyes. And basically, they're kind of higher up on the head in Pennsylvanicus than they are in Oricomis. So you kind of have to draw this imaginary line off of the top, across the top of the head. And we can see that Oricomis has a larger space there. But in general, for the ones that photos where we're able to reliably separate them out, what's most useful for me when I'm doing these IDs is having a good view of the first couple abdominal segments. So this first photo here, we can see that there's a good amount of yellow hair across that first abdominal segment. There's a series of photos here. There's one showing that the face, a couple showing the face on the top of the head, where we could also zoom in on those and try to see what's going on with the hairs. It's generally looks like it's black. It can be tricky to know if that's just lighting or not, especially when it's kind of subtle. That's one of the characters that, for me, it works better in person, where I can be sure of the light. It can be hard to do it in person, and I tend to rely more on that feature on the abdomen. Here is an Oricomis, black and gold bumblebee, where again we have a nice series of photos, but this one really helps to be able to see what's going on T1 and T2, those first two abdominal segments, and see lots of black there, with black going on to the second abdominal segment. I wanted to talk about a few other things. So we've got an observation here. One of the things, when I'm not able to get to species, we just kind of need to do a bombus spa. But this is one that I noticed afterwards. So this is the only photo that was submitted for this, but they do have a comment that they have there that there's videos available. If the photo is not diagnostic, those comments can really help. I don't always notice them at first when I'm going through IDs and I'm trying to get through hundreds of them. But when it's something where it's tricky and I go back and look, it is really helpful to know that. So this is something where I will reach out and see if we can get a hold of the video. It looks like there's a good chance of being able to figure out what it is if we could just get to that video. Sometimes the comments will also have things that you can just put in helpful comments. If you notice something that would be hard for me to tell from the lighting or things like that, if you're able to see like, oh, there are dark hairs on the side of the thorax, this wasn't just a shadow, that helps to be able to have that information in the comments so I can, if I have any questions about what I'm seeing on the photo and you were able to see things more clearly in person, if you have details like that to put into the comments, that can be really helpful. This is an example of a photo where we just have one photo. It really looks like it is the yellow-banded bumblebee. That would be my best guess. But if I'm not 100% sure, I try not to verify completely. There is a setting for verifications that is tentative. And that's, I just, I do my best to not make mistakes when I'm verifying things. The way that things work within Bumble Bee Watch for identification is there's just experts that are going in and identifying things. There's not cross-checking with other experts unless we do it ourselves. So sometimes we'll have there's a network of people that are IDing bumblebees on Bumble Bee Watch, and sometimes we'll email each other saying, oh, could you double check what do you think of this? But yeah, if I just had a photo from another angle, I could be sure, and then this wouldn't be tentative. I'm like probably 90% sure, but I like to be 100% sure. This is an example of a photo where this is the only photo that we have, and it really is just too blurry to be able to get past just the level of bumblebee with it. So just watching out for that. It's better to get photos here just in case there are features that we can see, but being mindful of that. I wanted to mention too, so a lot of these ones that I've been going through have been ones that people are doing as part of the Atlas surveys, where people are catching bees, usually chilling them down to be able to get these photos that are really close up. Sometimes just taking them through the vials, but most of the photos I've been showing so far are ones where people are capturing the bees. This is an example. Some of these other ones I'm going to show, there are situations where people are not able to, for various reasons, capture bees. So one of the instances for that is where people are doing surveys in areas where the rusty patch bumblebee has been found. And so when that is the case, then unless you have a permit to be able to handle the bees, we encourage volunteers to only use photos to avoid possibly handling the rusty patch bumblebees without appropriate permits. So So it's really important to still look for bumblebees in those areas. So we definitely appreciate people going into those areas and continuing surveys. But when they are from photos of bees on flowers, that gets into a whole different range of issues with taking the photos. So this is an example of one where it's probably Bombus impatiens, probably the common eastern bumblebee, but I can't really see it completely well. There were a couple of photos, but these are actually two different photos, but kind of the same angle. So pointing to the importance of being able to get different angles when you're taking photos of the bees. So I mentioned, needing to just have the photo only surveys for the areas with rusty patch bumblebee. Here's an example of a series of photos where we are able to get species ID, where we were able to see that this is rusty patch bumblebee, and there's a nice series of photos where we can clearly see what's going on those first couple abdominal segments. We can see what's going on the thorax. Here's a different bee, rusty patch bumblebee, and we can see the diagnostic features we need to see. This, if it was only this photo, we can see something that looks like a rusty patch, but is that the light or not? But here we can really see more clearly that is definitely a rusty patch there. So this is another example of one that I have as tentative, most likely Oricomus, showing these different angles, but not quite in focus enough to be able to really clarify. But other photo only ones we're able to see clearly. We have a bunch of different angles showing up here to be able to see clearly that this is common eastern. Another one here, which is with different angles of the bees on the same flower. So with those photo only surveys, it becomes even more important to really try to get some of those different angles. It's more of a challenge because they're just on the flower and they're moving around and they may take off at any second. So you can't guarantee that you'll get all the angles, but it does really help to do that as much as you can. So yeah, we still have plenty of time for questions. I was going to just go over some bees in Bumble Bee Watch as well, but in general, kind of just summarizing some tips to remember for next season, that more photos or even a video are always better if there's any doubt about if you're capturing. If you looked at the photos here, some of them are beautiful photos that could be hung up on someone's wall, and many of them are not necessarily that, but they show what we need to see for our purposes here. So keeping in mind that the photos don't need to be pretty. I don't mind looking at pretty photos of bumblebees, but the main thing that I'm focusing on when I'm going through those is to really focus on the features. And again, those comments can help us to let us know details that aren't in the photo. And just also overall, when possible, showing those three different angles, the top, side, and the front angles. When you can, being able to show those first few abdominal segments without the wings in the way, either maybe they're moving their wings, maybe you're able to get an angle from the side and it's lit well enough that we can see kind of what's going on around the abdomen. And then when you do have those bumblebees that have yellow on the first two abdominal segments, so they're going to be probably Vegans or Sandersoni, to remember to see if you can get close-ups of the faces, actually both for males and females. For the males, we really want to see if you can get those antennae in focus, because that is the feature that really helps us pick those apart. So yeah, I'll stop sharing that. Any questions or comments? So I know there's a lot of people in here that are out there doing this, spending more time taking photos of bees on flowers than I am. If anybody has any other tips to share?
We do have some stuff in the chat. There is a question that says, what helps to ID male versus female and queen versus worker?
So for male versus female, mostly they'll mostly be covered by kind of what we were talking about. So you know, a face shot is usually good enough. The other thing that's nice to see is the hind leg. The females will have pollen carrying stuff on the back of their hind leg, and the males won't. So I mean, the easy thing is if they have pollen on their leg, you can easily see it's a female. But if they don't, just being able to see the hind leg. But usually, you know, if you do have a face shot, that's usually enough too. Sometimes you can see it just from getting a nice view from the top and seeing the abdomen. For the males, their abdomens are more tapered. For the queens, so I usually don't distinguish. So when we ID stuff, when we go through verifying observations in Bumble Bee Watch, you know, we pick out the species, and then we can pick out male, female, worker, queen. I usually, unless I'm really sure, don't do a lot of separating out females from queens. Queens, for many species, they overlap quite a bit. So it's usually a timing thing where kind of early in the season and late in the season, there's more of them. They're just bigger. The only exception to that being with the rusty patch bumblebee, the queens actually have different coloration. So those we can be sure of when we do see them. But yeah, for picking out queens, it's kind of a size and season call. So it does sometimes, you know, what helps for that is having some kind of size relation thing. So it is sometimes easier if there's, you know, a flower or something else that's next to the bee that I can use to tell how big it might be. Oops, I can't hear you, Kathy.
I put a picture in the comments with my question. I can open it, you have to click on it. And I'm seeing in this one place where there's a lot of black and gold bumblebees every year in my neighborhood. So, but some of them do have yellow on T1, sometimes a stripe and sometimes like just on the sides. And then I try to look at their head. But it looks like in the picture, to me, it has a nice T1 yellow stripe, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have I've forgotten already, but it doesn't have the black that a Pennsylvanicus would have.
Right, so this one, right?
Yeah. So, and I have other pictures that show the T1 stripe from the top, but this one showed the head better. So maybe I'm confused about, you said it's not the collar, it's farther up on the head. So maybe I would need a front shot.
Right, yeah. Can you see I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yeah, I can see, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really like here, really
Yeah.
on top of the head. And so it's hard to see. It does look like, so you're saying this yellow kind of goes all the way across.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, and I mean, I'm not seeing much for yellow hair there, so that,
Maybe, so I just kind of assumed they were Oricomats, but, and I haven't uploaded these to Bumble Bee Watch, so I think I will.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I look for some others from that place, because it's like, another Oricomats won't upload them, but I'll pick out some that have the T1 and see what you guys think.
And you said this was over kind of east
Yeah,
St. Paul.
it's off
Yeah.
of Phelan Boulevard, where it, off of Arcade, where it dives into Sweet Hollow, East Side
Yeah.
Heritage Park, but
Yeah,
there's
they're
a big
around.
field
So they are around the Twin Cities, Pennsylvanicus. They're get more common out in more open areas.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of milk vetch that seems to
Mm.
be the key for that persistent group of black and gold, or maybe Pennsylvanicus. So then I had one other question, but I see other people do too. So. Yeah, and I'll just do my other question, because yesterday there were some, if you know where Reservoir Woods is off of Larpenteur, it's a dog walk park, but it's real big. It's where the water for the Metro St. Paul East Side metro area is stored in that huge tank. And I saw 2 rusty patches there, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. And so it looks like the Boy Scout troop worked with the city of Roseville to put interpretive signs. So I attached a picture of the interpretive sign. I just saw this yesterday.
Oops.
And I wondered, and this is a real common error, because the people always tell me, oh, I just saw a bunch of rusty patches, because they're thinking of the red as rust. So I want to send them a note. But I wondered if, and I run into this a lot, there's kind of shoestring groups that are working with interpretive signs, or they want to put them up and there just isn't money to do that. And it would be it's just so great to see this, and the one at Sweet Hollow, which has your name on it, Elaine. And it really educates a lot of people. But if there's any funding anybody knows about, put in the chat, and I'll pass that on with my note to them about this red belted instead of a rusty patch.
At least it's a bumblebee and not a fly.
Yeah.
Or a honeybee.
A honeybee, yeah. Okay, thanks.
I see another question in the chat here. It says, sometimes it happens that your subject got blown away and you didn't get all the pictures you needed. Is it okay to submit several subjects as one ID submission?
So you're talking about different, you have a photo of one bee and it blew away and you're taking a picture of another bee?
Yeah, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes, like, you get part of the bee picture, maybe you get the top, and maybe you get a good headshot, and then like a little wind comes and poof, it goes. And it's like, well, I know there's a whole bunch of the same species at that same, so I may look like a different bee, but the species will be the same, but to somebody like you, it may look like, well, that's a different bee, but to me, this is my first year doing it. I don't know some of those really nice identifiers. So to me, even in my own yard, when I observe bees, it looks like one flower has one species and another flower has a different species. So they all look the same to me when they're they're together like that. So I'm wondering if I get multiple pictures of the same, what I think are the same species, and get all those really key shots, is that important?
It is important to have each submission just be one individual.
With as many shots as you can get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just because there does, there can be some of these that end up being really tricky, and plus just the way that we look at the data is we're assuming each of these observations is one bee.
Got it.
So, especially with the Atlas surveys where, they're timed and we're, able to count abundances.
Right.
Yeah, we need each one to just be one bee.
Okay, makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, I feel for you when they just get blown away.
I know you got like 2 or 3 of them, it's like, this is your sweet pictures. And then it's like, missed my opportunity.
Yeah, but sometimes, just depending on the photo and the species, even if you do just have the one photo, sometimes that is enough.
Yeah.
So it's worth submitting just that, if you just have one photo, hope there's a chance, even if it's not a beautiful photo, it may be enough.
I don't think I encountered either one of those situations this year. So it just popped into my head at different times. It's like, even in my own backyard practicing, I was like, well, I didn't even get what I wanted, But okay, cool.
We can also just do some see what happens here if we can try just looking at sorry, I'm doing this while I'm thinking. Go into Bumble Bee Watch and just share with you how things look when we're doing this. Feel free, and Elise, just let me know because I can't really see the chat very well when I'm doing this. So yeah, I was just going to kind of go through some random bees that I still need to verify, kind of show what I'm doing there. So oh, it's not, let's see. It's being goofy. There we go. There, you can see my zoom in, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is someone had submitted with, probably thinking it's vegan. So I'm just trying to look at the, see if any of these different shots they have here, we can see what's going on with that mailer space. So we can see the pollen basket there. So this is a female, and it does look, yeah, vegans is a good guess. We just have to separate out and make sure that it's not Sandersoni. And yeah, the lighting is a little bit tricky, but especially on this photo, even though it's the lighting isn't super clear, I can still see kind of this, you can see the kind of the outline, you can see kind of the bump of where the malar space starts under the eye, and you can see the bump of where the mandible starts. And that does look like a long space to me. And also, if we look at the map, Sandersoni tend to not be very common in the southern half of the state, and kind of, yeah, this is generally in the zone where if signs indicate vagans, then it's most likely vagans. So this is one that I can go ahead and again, here I tend to just go female, male, looking at the time of year and the size. This is going to be one that's that's most likely a worker. And just so you know, we also have this section, under the hood here where we have determiner notes. So so I usually, if I'm using that mailer space, or there's something that I'm using to tell them apart, I usually try to stick a note in there, so that if someone else is looking at in the future and thinking, why did someone say this was vegans, there's some information there. So so here's another one. There's a few photos here from way up north, and even just from this photo, we can see enough to see this nice round body shape that Terricola has, the yellow-banded bumblebee, and they have those kind of fringe of yellow hairs at the back end. This one for male, female, just looking at the hind leg here. If this was this kind of, it's a bit convex, pointing, bulging out, whereas if it was a female, that hind leg would be concave, angled in to help hold pollen. So this is another one we can go ahead and verify. This one is pretty obvious, so I wouldn't bother putting determiner notes in there for this one. Here's another vegan, so we can see right away female with that beautiful pollen basket there. And this one, that head is pretty clear. And so what do you all think? Do you agree with vegans for this one? Looking at that mailer space.
Yeah, it looks long to me.
Yeah, so it can be kind of subtle, but for Sandersoni, it does tend to be more, really have a more squarish look. So yeah, this is one we can go ahead and verify as female. And just put the note there. And this one, did have some other photos, but really this being able to see the couple bands there, and being able to see that mailer space close up on this one, those were really helpful.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is about Rufocinctus. It says, I see a lot of two-stripe red belted. I look for the eye of Sauron between the two wings. Are there any other tips?
Yeah, I mean, see if we have any pending ones here to look at. There is, you can, there are some patterns, so there's a lot of variability in their color patterns. But seeing either if they do have the red hairs, seeing the mixture of red and black hairs close to each other, which I bet this one shows that. So this is actually pretty reddish, but you can see this kind of for this one, looking at what's happening on the second abdominal segment, where this one you maybe would want to tell it apart from the tri-colored. And for this one, there's kind of this curve happening on T2 there, where whereas for the yellow banded, it's these distinct stripes. This one has kind of a mix of yellow and orange hairs on that second abdominal segment. There's other ones where they have the red hair, but it's really kind of mixed in with blacks or yellow. So this one, you can see this one does it a bit more, where it's not super reddish hairs. You can see that there's other kind of black hairs mixed in with the red. And somewhat just kind of getting to know the different variations. They have a short face, so that's something to look out for. Yeah, does that help? They're confusing because they look so many different ways. So here's one without any red, but lots of black hairs between the thorax, between the wings on the thorax, and this kind of black at the edges of the second abdominal segment, but then for the ones that have it, yellow and kind of a bit of a swoopy shape on the second abdominal segment.
One thing that I've noticed about the Rufocinctus as well is their hairs look different than other bees. Like they look a little bit fuzzier. So that's another thing to pay attention to.
Yeah, so this one is a nice shot of that kind of eye of Sauron look, that kind of balls can look kind of shiny and really eye-shaped spot on the thorax. And then that kind of black at the edges of T2, but then and this is one of the models where it's just kind of yellow, where they don't have red. So again, nice shot of showing the thorax and just seeing those kind of intermixed, or the red orange hairs intermixed with other colors on the abdomen.
We've got another question if we're ready to move on. Says, do you prefer we make a guess for the two-stripe or just defaults to the two-stripe group, assuming we were able to get some good ID photos?
You mean it's for picking out if you should pick out vegans if you think it's vegans? I mean, I think I'm good either way. if you do, I do personally prefer if you have an inkling of which it might be, putting that in. A lot of times how I go through with verifying things is I'll set a time to look at vegans, and I'll just pull up all of the ones that people have put in as vegans and, go through them all. So it does help to have that. And I don't know, Katie, I know you're here, you do a lot of this stuff too. If you have thoughts about that you want to share.
I actually missed that sentence right before.
Oh, okay. Just for people, if they have, vegans or two-stripe group, if it's better to put in, or even sometimes people, just put in Bombas Spa, they don't do it. For me, I think I like it if people put in, the kind of their best guess as far as it can go for ID, if they can get to a guess for a species that I can then go through and double check on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I like when people put in a guess, but if you have no idea, it's also just as easy for us to change it around. It's not a big deal at all.
And I don't know, do you want to introduce yourself, even though it's the last minute here, Katie?
Yeah, sure. Sure. My name is Katie Lamke. So I coordinate the Nebraska Bumble Bee Atlas, the Missouri Bumble Bee Atlas, and up into the Dakotas and Kansas, the Great Plains Bumble Bee Atlas. So I'm also living on Bumble Bee Watch with Elaine and Elise.
And we'll all be working together more as we start a Midwest or Great Plains Bumble Bee Atlas.
Whatever the name's going to be.
Right. Any other questions or thoughts? It's nice to get a chance to think about bumblebees. And so yeah, Katie, we're already a few inches into, I don't know how many inches of snow we're getting today. It's coming down here. So very, very much winter here. Nice to think about the queens all cozied in somewhere, hopefully, and waiting for them to come out next spring. Any other tips or ideas from anyone in our last half a minute?
This isn't exactly related to ID, except that when I was looking along the Iowa border and I moved a little west, I noticed the restorations I was trying to find bumblebees in and not finding hardly anywhere, more tallgrass prairie. And I realized I don't know how bumblebees act there, and they're harder to find. It's not like woodlands or, knee-high or even waist-high flowers, because the grass gets so tall. Have you guys have any tips for what I should look for? And then I might be zooming in more, just like I do in the city parks where they don't want you tromping all over their flowers, the restorations. So I do have to zoom in and not get as good a resolution. But there's something about pictures and where you're at too. There's some limits, it seems like, that I was running into last summer. Anyway, I didn't find many bumblebees, so then I thought maybe they don't like tallgrass prairies. So. Or maybe I just can't see them, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely should be bumblebees in tallgrass prairie. And yeah, I don't know, it does. I think some of it depends on the year too, if it's really dry, finding areas closer to water can help sometimes. Yeah, I might call out on you, Katie, again too.
Yes, I can confirm there are bumblebees in tallgrass prairie, at least down here in Nebraska anyways. I also stick to places that are around water. And if you're in, I mean, as I go west and it becomes more mixed grass or dry grass prairie, and you get into a little bit more topography, sometimes towards the higher hilltops, if you want to call them that, have a little bit more flower diversity, and I'll find some more bees up in that area. But yeah, it can be a little bit demoralizing, should I say, to walk around such a large area of tall grass and
Yeah.
have trouble swinging in it, but they're out there.
Yeah, I decided to think it was interesting and, not like, man, I'm giving up, because it's just really different than like a rich, wet, rolling, hills thick with bee balms.
All right, well, I think that brings us to the end of our lunch hour here. So thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope this was helpful. We did record this, so we can share it if you if you want to review anything, or can share it with others as well. So yeah, thanks everybody.